and welcome to the Feminine Bite. My name is Erin, and I'm here with my host, Emily.
Hello.
And today, we are going to be talking about a memoir. Emily doesn't know what this memoir is called.
I don't know a single thing.
Because the title of this memoir is insane. So, for today's unhinged opening, I am going to be revealing the title of this memoir to Emily word by word.
Oh god. I'm so nervous. Word by word is insane.
There is one word that you might not know, and that's an ethnicity, and I'll tell you which one it is.
Okay.
But you might know it. I don't know. I don't know what anyone knows about anything.
Well, the one word that I won't know, if I know if it's an ethnicity, I'll go, okay.
Yeah. So you're gonna have to read these out loud as I hand them to you, okay?
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna start off pretty basic, pretty good.
Memoir of A. Now let me, for the record, Erin, that is not just a word.
Okay, there are some, little words in between them. I'm giving you buzzwords.
Okay. Memoir of A. Basque?
Yes.
Is that how I'm saying? Okay.
Basque. That's the ethnicity.
Okay. Memoir of a Basque. Lieutenant? Okay. None? Okay, so let's piece these things together. Memoir, okay, that makes sense. Of a Basque lieutenant, that makes sense. This string of words makes sense. I didn't know. Here's the thing: is I didn't know that you could be a lieutenant and a nun at the same time. From my current recollection. Okay. Anyway.
Emily's about to quit this podcast. Now, you can say this word because of the historical context.
Okay. Transvestite. Okay. So. Okay. These three things, I'm stacking the cards that say lieutenant, nun, and transvestite all together. These three things usually do not appear in concurrence.
We got one more word.
This usually precedes or antecedes sweet, and is typically sung by Tim Curry. Okay. Anyway.
And here is the last word. This one's not that shocking, but it is our location of the memoir for our date.
In the New World.
So this is when Spain was conquering the Americas.
In the 1300s?
The 1600s.
1600s?
Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna put these back. I'm gonna give those to you. I don't know if I should fear this memoir, or if I should be intrigued by this memoir.
Honestly, both.
Okay.
I'm when I had this idea and not telling you the title, I'm sure Emily was like, oh, who are we gonna cover? I was like, I don't think that Emily is ready for just how batshit the title is alone. Now I can show you the book. It has a picture of Catalina on it. So you can take a look at that while I read our disclaimers, because we have some disclaimers. Alright, Catalina de Erauso is a real person, and scholars agree that most of what takes place in his memoir actually happened, though it's accepted some details may be dramatized, which made Catalina a folk hero and more mythic than he actually was. Catalina's life is extraordinary, and at times Emily and I may make jokes, be unserious, express sympathy or positivity, or just be in awe and in shock at his downfalls and accomplishments, but it's important to remember that Catalina was a colonizer who participated in the Arauconian Wars, which was a conflict between the conquistadores of Spain and the Mapuche Nation, which was valiantly won by the Mapuche Nation. I'm going to quote the foreword written by Michel Steptoe because he really captures this complexity, this complex sentiment best. Steptoe is a professor at Yale. He has a PhD in English. And this is the quote. He says, "Moreover, Catalina's victories, her sense of self and valor are earned at the expense of the indigenous people of the Indies and often at the expense of women, Spanish born or indigenous, whom she chances upon her travels. It would be a misreading to see her as anything other than a perfect colonist, manipulative, grasping, and at moments out and out bigoted. To align Catalina as a cross dressing, quote unquote, other with the victims of colonialism is to miss the truth that rewards her transformation were gained almost wholly at the expense of others. Catalina is an anti hero we can't help but like, yet, regardless of how much we may like her, she is not one whom we can easily admire. So, Aaron, I have a minor in world religions, but neither Emily nor I are experts. We are just two gals who are talking about interesting things. We do both have bachelor's degrees, and so I'm confident in our ability to give you a, well thought out and informative and accurate experience, but because we're not scholars or experts, we're likely to make mistakes, and I want to apologize in advance for any mistakes that we might make. Terminology changes over time, so during this episode, you will hear the word transvestite and potentially other outdated terms. If this is your first time hearing this word, please heed this warning. Do not use this term in modern speech unless someone has explicitly decided this is an identifying term they use. This term is generally considered outdated and derogatory, and we will only be mentioning it because it's the word our translators went with in 1996. We're done with the disclaimers.
That's like as big of a disclaimer as you would get in a pack of birth control.
You're gonna learn that this book gives you cancer.
Oh, by the way.
We are not quite done with these cards yet.
Okay.
So,
oh god.
We're gonna go in whatever order you want. You can go in the order of the title or not, but I'm gonna give you just a brief overview of the significance of all of these words so we can set the scene before we go into the actual details.
Okay.
So if you want to go in any specific order, if you want to go crazy.
For linear sake, we'll go in order of the title.
Okay, so we're going to start with memoir. So this is a quote again from the introduction to this story, because I think that they kind of say it best, and I'm not just gonna try and regurgitate it, I'm just gonna quote them. So, this memoir went on a journey from when Catalina wrote it, to where it was stored, to how it got published. This, you know that scene in The Prince of Egypt where Moses' basket kind of like goes through all of those hoops? Mm-hmm. Imagine that, but it's Catalina's memoir.
Okay.
So they say, while this story of Catalina's life flourished in folklore, the manuscript of her memoir led a quiet, unpublished existence for a century or more after being composed. It was in the possession of the Urbizo family of Seville, the same family whose ancestor had been Catalina's first master in Peru. And first master in Peru, that is not slave owner master, that is boss. I should mention that. She says, these are my masters. He's not enslaved, that's just who his boss is. Sometime during the 18th century, the Spanish poet Candido Maria Trigueros made a copy of the original, and from this copy in 1784, the royal historian Don Juan Bautista Munoz made another copy. And then after Hispanicizing the Basque names and supplying a new title, The Life and Events of the Lieutenant Nun, written by herself, Munoz entered into entered it into this paper, but that remained unpublished until his death. And then in the 1820s, a Basque gentleman named Jocon de Ferrer obtained a copy, fixed the names, and then set about publishing it. So we went through a lot.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So, I know generally that this is about what you have described to me is this is written by a trans woman?
Technically. We'll get to that when we talk about the word transvestite.
Okay. And so I just wanted to clear... Hi.
We'll talk about how to refer to Catalina in that section.
Okay.
Because
I've heard all
the genders.
Pronouns that are typically used, I've heard.
Yep.
Okay. Cool.
Well, I promise we'll get there. So the other thing to know about this memoir is that Catalina, it's very clearly influenced by the picaresque literary genre, which was popular in Spain at the time. Genre is characterized by episodic storytelling told about rough and dishonest but appealing heroes. And according to Steptoe, this genre is a creature of discovery and conquest, a storytelling brought to birth by the sudden, vast, and changing world. So there are some things in this memoir, if you read it yourself, if you feel like, did that really happen? If you're questioning that, it might not have. This is definitely an embellished story.
Okay.
Absolutely. Which is why Catalina has kind of become this mythic character, because it went viral in the 17th century. So our next word is Basque. So this is a Southwest European ethnic group. They are called Basque, but they also go by the name Usaldanak, and that's how they refer to themselves in the Basque language. They're indigenous to an area referred as Basque Country or Euskal area, which is located in right by the Bay of Biscay. It's on the border of South France and North Spain.
Okay.
That's where we are.
Yeah.
This ethnicity has a population of about 3 million, with 2.4 million in Spain alone. They speak Basque, French, and Spanish, and their predominant religion is Catholicism, but it's by no means exclusively Catholic. So Catalina is proudly Basque. That's what they call themselves. They never call themselves Spanish. And several times in his journey in the New World, he meets other Basque individuals, and they just come out of the woodworks to help them. There are several times where Catalina's like, I got arrested, but this guy was Basque, and he helped me escape.
Interesting.
Yeah. Our next word is lieutenant. Catalina served in the Spanish army in Peru, Chile, and Bolivia, and was recognized for his skills on the field and received the rank of second lieutenant. They participated in the Arauconian Wars against the Mapuche Nation. Now we're on the word nun. So, Catalina de Erauso technically was a nun, but he didn't take his final vows, and that's an important plot point later. And the only thing I want to talk about here is that in this era, the idea of the nunnery was considered the second option for women. Mm-hmm. So women at this time, they could own property and things like that. That's just a myth that women could never own property. But they pretty much had one option, and it was get married and have kids. Women were still always sort of attached to a male figure, whether it's father, mm-hmm. husband, or son. And then when the nunneries are basically if you wanted another option than having kids and being a wife, the nunnery was your option. Mm-hmm. And then, that TikTok trend that's what's classy if you're rich but trashy if you're poor?
Yeah.
If that TikTok trend happened in the 17th century, the answer would be nunneries. Because, poor people would send their almost all their daughters, honestly, mm-hmm. but most of their daughters, poor people would send them because they can't afford all of the dowries, mm-hmm. but rich people send their daughters because they don't want to pay for all those dowries.
Interesting.
So while nunneries were this second option and women could have this choice, it got ruined by rich people who are like, oh, all these extra daughters, just throw them in the nunnery.
If this is something that you'll cover later, forgive me.
Yeah, you're fine.
But I can't imagine 17th century?
Yeah.
17th century nunneries being very inclusive in terms of gender. Not, biological discrepancies in gender, I should say.
Yeah, you would be... Well...
So, how did Catalina become a nun?
Catalina was born, basically, into it. She was thrown in the nunnery when she was, 3 years old. He starts in the nunnery and then escapes. That is a word that the people who wrote the foreword, they're Catalina escapes the nunnery. That's their words. So, okay. Catalina was, raised to kind of be a nun, and then they leave. And then we're finally... Okay. So sex and gender, when it comes to Catalina de Erauso, is very complicated because 1, he's never explicit, 2, he's dead. So we can't ask him for clarification. This is a word for every queer person. If you have a diary, right now, open it up, open your diaries, and please detail your identities and exactly what that means. Anthropologists in 1,000 years will thank you. Go do that right now. So, according to Michael Steptoe, in the introduction, they say this is a note on Catalina's sexuality because some people think that Catalina is a lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
And this is sort of how Catalina feels about love and sex. And he says the traditional comedy of cross dressing is driven by the marriage plot, and as such, strongly privileges heterosexuality. This is not the case with Catalina's memoir. Her story is free of heterosexual bias. The men she portrays are never potential lovers. The women, by contrast, almost always are. So, Catalina rarely brings up his sexuality in text, and that sparks debate whether or not he's actually a lesbian. He's fairly disinterested, even though there are a few scenes where, like, he is interacting with women in a very erotic manner, I guess. It's not very explicit. I would, it is not explicit. But does that make him a lesbian? Kind of depends if you view Catalina as transgender or not, which is another debate. He's called a transvestite in the connotation that he's a man that, like, he's dressing up as a man and adopting a masculine gender. But, like, his sexuality, Catalina never explicitly identifies what he is. And he's dead now, so we can't ask him. This is our major problem, which is he's dead, so we can't ask him. I've attempted to be as accurate as possible in how to refer to Catalina. I'm obviously one person and can make mistakes, and the age and ambiguity of this document makes it very difficult to navigate. Catalina goes by Antonio when presenting as male, and I think sometimes he goes as Miguel. And he lives out his life as Antonio after the events of the autobiography. But because Catalina introduces himself as his birth name, which is Catalina, and has his name as Catalina on the autobiography, I'm going to call him by Catalina, but I'm using he, him pronouns because in this text, this is lost because it's translated from Spanish, but Catalina tends to use the masculine forms of words in order to refer to himself, and then there are specific moments where they refer to themselves with female pronouns and things like that, but that is all lost because it's translated into English, so I don't know what those parts are. So I've been using he, him pronouns. If when I'm quoting the introductions, they use she, her. If you go onto Wikipedia, if you put in Catalina's name, it'll actually reroute you to Antonio de Erauso. That is who you're looking for. There are no correct answers because Catalina's dead and we can't ask him. So there's your question about how do we refer to him. This is the best I could do.
Okay, so I was under a wrong impression then, because I think when I hear the word transvestite,
it's got a very negative.
Well, I've heard it in the context more specifically with, like, people who are born male dressing up as women, and not the other way. So I was confused at the very beginning.
We had an equipment problem.
Yeah, I was going the other way.
Okay, so. Sorry, yeah. Catalina was assigned female at birth.
Okay, thank you.
There we go.
That's, all the wires are connected now.
For our final buzzword, the New World, this takes place mostly in South America, and Catalina is, like, usually being paid by the Spanish crowd. We're specifically in Chile and Peru for most of this story. By the time Catalina arrives in the Peru is already, like, a thriving Spanish-controlled colony. When his story is finished, he basically goes to the Pope and is like, hey, can I dress as a man? And then becomes Antonio de Erauso and spends the rest of his life in South America, I think, as a mule merchant. Like, they have this insane story happen. They go to the Pope and say, can I wear pants? The Pope says yes, and then they are a mule merchant for the rest of their life.
You want to wear pants?
He is basically like the ungodly love child of Miguel, Tulio, and Cortez from the Road of El Dorado.
Oh my god.
Like, if those three sat down and had a child, it's Catalina de Erauso. You know, they're a clever rogue, always on the run, who barely manages to get through everything unalive, but is very deadly into the eyes of locals. You know, if she entered a beauty pageant, she'd win Miss Guns, Germs, and Steel. Okay.
Oh no.
So that's all of our context. Is there any other questions, reactions? How do you feel?
I'm nervous.
But do we have any other lasting questions that you might have before we get into the details and I hand you the quotes page? Because Emily's going to be doing dramatic readings of some of these quotes.
I don't think so. I think I'm good.
Okay.
I'm buckled now for this ride.
All right, here are your quotes, and I'll be like, read quote A, read quote B, you know.
Okay.
So, we begin with Catalina's childhood and his life in Spain. Catalina de Erauso is born and assigned female at birth to the parents Maria Perez de Galagra y Arca. If I mispronounce these names, I'm so sorry. And her father is Miguel de Erauso, and they lived in San Sebastian, Spain. At the age of 4, Catalina is sent to San Sebastian the Elder Convent and is put under the care of Ursula Unza y Sarasti, which is Catalina's aunt. So, like, I can't even say for certain that Catalina was raised by his own parents. Because we don't get any details to how often his parents are visiting this convent. Catalina is just like, I was born, these are my parents, I got thrown in a convent.
Yeah.
And in the foreword, we do learn what happened. Catalina has a bunch of siblings, and the foreword is basically like, all of the boys went to conquest, most of the first daughter got married, and the rest went to the convent. So that is basically what happened to the rest of Catalina's siblings. He would remain in the convent until he's 15, and Emily, we're gonna play a game.
Okay.
I want you to guess what happens next. And I'm gonna give you some options, okay?
Okay.
Because what happens next is kind of insane. So, A. While out getting supplies for the nunnery, Catalina sees a ship and then plans to leave for the New World the next day, so he sneaks on. B. Catalina's older brother arrives in San Sebastian, and he kills his brother to assume his identity and has to flee the city to avoid being arrested. And C. A nun kicks the shit out of Catalina so badly that Catalina just decides to rob the nunnery and escape.
I think the most plausible, given the very little that I know now, is A. But part of me thinks, because you have hyped up how wild this is, I want to say B.
The answer is C. God said thou shalt not kill, but he didn't say thou shalt not kick the shit out of each other. Emily, I'm gonna have you read quote A and Catalina describes this event.
When I was about to take my final vow and fully become a nun, I got into a quarrel with one of the sisters, Catalina de Aliri. She was a big, robust woman. I was but a girl. When she beat me, I felt it.
And Catalina kind of characterizes this as his breaking point. He, like, gets kicked the shit out of by this nun, and he's like, I'm done. And, like any reasonable child, Catalina fakes being sick to get out of mass. And he breaks into his aunt's room while all of the nuns are at mass. He steals thread, scissors, and money. And to quote...
The essentials.
Yeah, the essentials. It's like a Studio Ghibli film where they take, like, a block of cheese and an apple.
And then wrap it in a cute little thing, and then they tie it, and then all of a sudden all of those square things become a circle.
Yeah. So he steals that, and then to quote Catalina, he says, I shook off the veil and went into a street I have never seen, Without any idea of which way to turn or where I might be going, I struck out in what direction I cannot say. He just books it. And he finds like a chestnut grove, and he cuts up what clothes he has and creates men's clothes out of that. He has like a whole DIY vlog in this chestnut grove.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel.
Today we're making men's clothes out of a nun habit. I don't actually know what piece of clothing Catalina cuts. My assumption is that it's their habit. The uniform that nuns wear, because that's probably the only clothes that they should have.
Yeah.
But like I don't know. And then he does the Mulan thing where he like takes his hair and he cuts it to symbolize his change in character. And like if you Google Catalina de Erauso or Antonio de Erauso, that dude looks like he cut his hair with a knife. This is not a good look. I'm just gonna be honest. He's not looking the greatest. But once he cuts his hair, then he's gone. And he ends up in a city called Victoria, where a theologist takes him in out of, like, charity. And, you know, everything changes when the Fire Nation attack. No, that's the wrong world-shattering moment. Everything changes when the theologist learned that Catalina knew Latin. Because they're none. He wanted Catalina to be his student. And this is how Catalina reacts to this. If Emily, we would love to read quote B for us.
When I let him know I wasn't interested, he pleaded with me and went so far as to put his hands on me. When I decided to leave, that's exactly what I did. I relieved him of some money I found and set out. Just robbing people blind, left and right.
For a nun, like, he didn't finish his final vow, so he's not technically a nun, but for a nun, he sure does love breaking the commandments.
Yeah.
So, something that this is sort of the beginning of a pattern that Catalina tends to run when altercations get physical. We'll see this time and time again. At the moment that Catalina draws blood, or that blood is drawn, Catalina's out the door. Even when he becomes a soldier, if things get rough and things get physical, Catalina always runs. My question is, do you think that this is cowardice or like a trauma response?
What, taking money and running?
Just running when things get rough.
It could be.
Part of me wants to say cowardice, but at the same time, like, you know, was Catalina getting beat up by the nun, is that the only altercation, or was that Catalina's life and then he just had it out?
Mm-hmm.
I wish that we lived in a D&D world so I could speak with dead, because I have so many questions for Catalina.
Right.
I want to know.
Well, it's like, too, like, you are a queer person in a world that doesn't even have a word for that yet. And, like, you're with this man who, yes, like, in the nunnery, like, they face a lot of, like, physical violence, but, like, this is, like, violence with a man
is totally different.
Yeah, is different and new. So, yeah, like, I would get the fuck out of Dodge.
So, Catalina robs this man blind and runs, and he ends up in Valladolid and spends 7 months working as a page for a king. So pages in this era is as close to the queer scene as we will ever get in medieval Europe. We're going to quote the foreword again. Pages are often described in Renaissance literature as beautiful young boys who looked almost like girls and could be regarded as sexual partners for men and women. The cultural and erotic fascination with pages, their borderline genders and sexualities continued on into the 20th century. The theater has always been a haven for queer people, and this has been this way for centuries, and especially in Catalina's era, women on stage were played by men, and this caused both a fetishization, but also kind of like a gay awakening in audience members who found themselves attracted to, like, very, very effeminate men or very, very masculine women.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is important to bring up because an argument that radical conservatism attempts to make is that gender as a nuanced social construct is a modern problem that needs to be eliminated. and they're obsessed with like going back to the time where men are men and women are women, and you know that kind of argument. But the reality is that like a nuanced gender identity is as ancient as time will allow it. There has never been a point in time where there has not been nuanced gender identity. Which means that the only thing, if you went back in time, if you want to go back, the only thing that you would gain from that is that people of queer identities are either exploited for your entertainment or killed for not being in the gender binary or the sexuality binary. And my question is, why do you want to go back to that? Why? Why do you want that? Please submit your answers.
I always, like, never really understood like, this ideology that, like, everybody has to, like, think the same way that I do kind of mentality. Because even if I didn't fully agree with, like, transgenderism as a concept,
Which we do.
we do.
We do.
I'm saying in the hypothetical that I wasn't.
Yeah, I'm just like, I want to get that out there.
I know. Like, I could not fathom being like, oh, you're trans? Well, I'm gonna, like, disrespect that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
That's crazy to me. Of just, like, talking to a stranger and being like, no, it's what's in your pants. And then it's like, it's none of my business.
Yeah.
I've always been of the philosophy that it's like, you know, if it's none of my business, it's none of my business. If you tell me your boundary and what you like to be called and what you don't like to be called, I'm just gonna respect that you like to be called a certain way.
Yeah. And like, you know, and then you have people who are like, oh, well, it's just too difficult to remember everything. And it's like, is it though? Like,
you just have to remember a new name. It's like being introduced to a new person.
yeah, like,
but, oh, you already know this person? Great.
So, Catalina is once again on the run. And the events, they end up in Bilbao. But the events here are so weird. It's like an episode of a nameless, faceless high school drama. Like, think of a drama series that takes place in a high school. This is 100% one of those episodes. Like, so a bunch of snot-nosed kids, children, tiny humans, like, gang up on Catalina and, like, are harassing Catalina in the middle of the street. And then Catalina throws a rock at one of them. And Catalina ends up in jail for it.
Kids deserved it.
Yeah, like, here's the thing. Jesus said, he who is without sin, throw the first stone. And Catalina said, bonus points if you hit them in the eye.
That's funny.
Thank you. So Catalina takes work up as a page, and that, like, you know, one of the few options as where someone of gender nonconformity could go. And he's still in Spain, and he's working for the king's secretary, and a man shows up looking for his missing daughter. It's Miguel de Erauso, Catalina's father. And so we're going to read quote C about how Catalina reacts to his dad showing up.
When I heard the anguish in my father's voice, I backed off slowly and slipped away from my room. I got my clothes and 8 doubloons I had squirreled away and made my way to an inn, where I slept that night and caught wind of a driver leaving the next morning for Bilbao.
So yeah, Catalina, he shows up and Catalina just books it.
Yeah.
Honestly, if my dad showed up looking for me after I ran away, I would also book it.
Yeah. You gotta go.
You gotta go.
You gotta go.
Okay. And then we move into this, like, reoccurring theme where Catalina has such a bad case of main character energy that he often just, like, fucks off out of sheer boredom. And this particular moment is giving such Gossip Girl energy because, like, 2 years later, in 1603, Catalina decides to just go home to San Sebastian. They haven't left Spain yet, right? They just go home to San Sebastian, and he goes to mass at his old convent. And we're going to look at quote D for how Catalina describes this.
One day I went to hear Mass at my old convent, the same Mass my mother attended, and I saw that when she looked at me she did not recognize me, and when the Mass was over and some of the nuns had beckoned me to the choir, I made like I didn't understand, and with a bow here and a fine there, I slipped out the door.
Why? He just shows up and is like, I have Mass, and then I see my mom, she just recognizes me, and then I just leave. It's like, why would you do that?
Bye.
Bye. So we're now moving into part 2. I realize we're pushing 40 minutes. We might have to split this into 2 parts.
Okay, no worries.
But we'll go into a little bit of part 2. We are now starting to move this. Catalina spends a lot of time in Spain, but we are now moving from Spain and we are moving on into the New World. We are now in the movie The Road to El Dorado. So after spending time in port towns, Catalina boards a ship on March 23rd, 1603, to Sanlúcar, where she finds an uncle whom she sails with to the New World. The uncle doesn't know it's Catalina. I don't think it will surprise the reader to know that despite getting promoted and having the opportunity of a fairly stable life under his uncle's commands, when Catalina arrives in the New World, he robs his uncle and remains in Panama, and his uncle's ship leaves before they even know that Catalina wasn't on it. And Catalina just stays in the New World. They just show up to Panama, no job, no letter of introduction, just some money that he robbed from his uncle, and he's like, I'll just hang out here for a while, I guess.
I couldn't imagine doing that.
Yeah.
I could not. And that's like with me having a lot of access to a lot of information at one time.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't just. Even though I have the power of the internet and Google, I could not fathom just jumping on a boat. First of all, stealing some money, because I don't have the stealth or anything like that to steal things from anybody. Jumping on a boat, and then just being like, yeah, sure.
That works.
I'm like, no. I don't know. I need to know the parking situation of concerts in venues that I already know. That I've already been to.
Yeah, for the argument of is Catalina a transgender man, honestly, they have so much male audacity that the audacity alone supports the idea that Catalina is a man. Because Catalina's main struggle from this point forward is every incompetent man's struggle. Holding down a job. We're laughing, I promise. Emily is just... Don't know, she's taking off her glasses. That's how we know that it's serious.
I know.
But for now, at this point, Catalina does have a job with a merchant. Something fairly unique about Catalina's voice in this autobiography, if you haven't quite picked up on it yet, is that he is often very, very casual about very serious and sometimes very traumatic events. This man sounds like he wrote this high because of how casual he is. I'll give you an example. I'm reading this quote. Catalina says, I left Panama with my new master, Juan de Urquiza, aboard a frigate bound for the point of Paята, where he was expecting a large shipment. But as we neared the port of Manta, we were overtaken by such foul weather that the ship capsized in a squall, and those who could swim, myself, my master, and some others, made it to shore. All the rest drowned. In Manta, we managed to find a passage into one of the king's galleons for a princely sum, and we headed for the port of Paята, where my master found his shipment as expected, in a vessel belonging to Captain Alonso Serrato. He then charged me with the task of sending the shipment in numerical order and went on ahead. That's one paragraph. We spend more time in this paragraph talking about merchant nonsense than we do over the fact that their ship capsized and most of them drowned.
Yeah, like, our ship capsized or whatever, and, like, we got out fine, and, like, some people drowned, and it's just, like, but, great news.
We found our shipment. We got everything. I made the money. Sometimes Catalina writes so psychopathically. Here's a good point of reference. We're gonna in the Hunger Games. We're back on the Hunger Games shit. Annie Cresta is a character who is mentally unstable because in her games she watches her district teammate get beheaded, and then the game makers flood the entire arena. So she wins because she was the best swimmer. So she listens to everyone around her drown, and she is like mentally unstable. It's a defining moment. It speaks to the horrors of the games. But when Catalina is recalling these events, she's like, "Oh yeah, some people drowned. It was fine, but we got the shipment, and I did it in numerical order." What?
Huh?
What?
Is Catalina perhaps a sociopath?
I feel like, well, one, we can't know for sure because Catalina's dead and we can't have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But if we are to say, is there evidence to support that it was possible that he was a sociopath? I would say yes.
Because it sounds like lack of empathy is like very first textbook symptom.
Yeah.
And that very much screams of lack of empathy.
Yeah, and the times where Catalina is empathetic, I personally felt like it is sandwiched between like they need a desired outcome, and so they don't really feel the empathy doesn't feel very authentic.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll never know for sure because Catalina's dead and we can't ask him. But I do feel like there is evidence to support the fact that he might be slightly sociopathic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because I think we'll end this episode right here, and so because next we're going to be going into just Catalina's best years as in the new world, and it is a whole thing. So I think we'll end this episode here, and then we'll start next episode with some of the nitty-gritty details about Catalina.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys can, this has been the Feminine Bite with Erin and Emily. You can find us on Instagram. I think that's the only place we're at.
We're on X. We're on Twitter.
We're on Twitter.
Yeah.
Oh my god, we're on Twitter?
I haven't been posting on Twitter though. I've been kind of bad at Twitter.
Erin doesn't have a Twitter, so I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, I technically have a Twitter, but like, I log into it maybe once every 6 months.
I just opened up the Twitter and it defaulted to the podcast, thing, and it just is, I just opened up to a tweet of a girl sucking cock. So, I don't know if we're gonna keep the Twitter for that long, if I'm gonna be honest.
And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave a comment, tell us what you think about Catalina. Do you think that Catalina is a sociopath? Do you feel that they are lacking empathy? We would like to know in the comments. Alright, everyone have a good rest of your night. We still don't know how to end these episodes.
That's a great question.
That's not a question.
I don't know.
We'll get better one day.